Thanks so much, Vicky. I think this is about the first time all of us have actually sat together. So no, I hope that keeps the expectations quite low. I was trying to think this morning how to introduce such an amazing panel, and also how to introduce this session. I thought, well, what's my activity online been this morning? And my first thing was to check each of the panelists on Technorati. I discovered that Dave hasn't blogged for a while, but we won't embarrass any of our other panelists. And then I thought, right, okay, fine. I think I've looked at Wikipedia for everyone as well. I'm not on Wikipedia, so no looking there. I thought, well, okay, well, let's look at Twitter. Let's catch up with what's going on. And I follow the Pet Shop Boys. Now, you weren't thinking the Pet Shop Boys would get mentioned in the first session, but the Pet Shop Boys, they'd put a short link in. I thought, oh, that's a bit curious. A short link, nothing else, right? I'm going to click on this. And I clicked on it, and it took me to Lily Allen's MySpace page, which really wasn't what I was expecting. And Lily Allen was talking about piracy, which she has been doing for the last week. And it was actually a surprisingly well-developed discussion. And I thought this was, I was talking to Bill just before this session. I was pleasantly surprised, but it also shows as well the democratization it's on MySpace, not just blogs, but also it's spread to various wide variety of people, allowing pop stars as well as us normal folk and others to have a voice. So we've got here quite a long list of things that we could potentially discuss from the history of weblogging circa mid-90s, through to what's happening now, and also what might be happening in the future. And I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to, as well as introduce themselves, say what their Twitter name is, if they have one, and or their blog, but also to say that the hashtag we're using today is OXSOC. So if any of you are on Twitter, it's OXSOC. So, Dave, would you like to kick off with a few words? And we're going to try and go to Q&A as quickly as possible.
So thank you, Kathryn. And first of all, I just wanted to thank the organizers here at OII for putting this together and for having us and coming over. It's been my first visit to Oxford, and it has been a magical experience so far. It's really a beautiful university. I mean, I'll try to be really quick because I think the most fun part of the most interesting part of these panels are always when we jump to audience questions and we can answer the questions that you all have. So very quickly for me, I mean, I've been involved in sort of internet technologies and building businesses for, I guess, now just a bit over 20 years. And I started blogging in 2002 and very quickly got to the point, I mean, I was very addicted to it, really, really excited about it. Really was interested in the feedback that I was getting from people. I mean, being able to participate in a two-way conversation was, I think, that wasn't a mailing list full of spam where I had to deal with, people who were unsubscribing all the time and all that other stuff. That, being able to just type stuff into a box and have it go up onto the web and not having to pay, some company $250,000 to do it was really, really exciting. And what I found very quickly was while this was an incredibly satisfying experience, the search engines that were out there, Google, Yahoo, Alta Vista, so on, were really left a lot to be desired. They were stuck essentially in the modus of the web as this library, right? And it's one of the metaphors that we tend to talk about the web in a lot, right? Where it's this library and it's the world's reference library. You can find out anything that you want. And what I was really excited about wasn't the web as library, and they were very good at that, but that wasn't what was really interesting to me. What was exciting for me was the web as conversation and thinking about it in a different type of metaphor. And what I realized was there was really no way for me to find out in real time what the most important thing that I cared about, which was what people were saying about me. I admit that's somewhat narcissistic. But it was sort of a deep need, and as kind of a geek, I was also very, very interested in what the technical implementations were when you start thinking about streaming-based architectures, event-driven architectures instead of polling-based or the more traditional library metaphors. And so, my basement with 2 computers I bought off of eBay and my home DSL line, I created Technorati and started indexing it all. And basically ran the company for about 5-6 years. I guess about in 2007, brought in a new CEO to help us kind of take it to that next level. But I'm still very active and help out as chairman of the board, and still very active in terms of social media. So whereas I don't blog quite as much on my personal blog anymore at Sifry.com, I use Twitter a lot. I use Facebook. So I'm Sifry on Twitter. And by the way, this is one of the really nice things about having an unusual last name. So all of you Smiths out there, I'm really sorry. It makes it really easy to kind of unify your namespace. So I'm pretty much Sifry, Sifry across all of the different media platforms, and so it's great. It's just exciting to be here. Thanks.
And on that note about real-time Twitter, what are your current thoughts about real-time search?
I think it's sort of the hot meme of the moment. And that's not to say that there isn't some very real value there. I think there's a different thing between usefulness and sort of business models that I think we can talk a lot about, but we could spend the entire conference talking about just those things. And I think that this isn't your mother's or your father's search, right? The intent of search is very, very different when you're looking to go and do research on a product, perhaps, than it is to find out what's the conversation going on about something. And both are extremely valuable and can be useful when you're doing, say, a commercial type search. But what we find is the intent of most people who are doing real-time type searches is very, very different from those people who are coming to a more traditional search engine. And so it begins to create both challenges, but also some really interesting opportunities. And there's already a number of companies and people who are out there who are building, rather than thinking about search interfaces, who are building filtering interfaces, right? And again, part of that comes down to just thinking a little bit differently. When instead of going and casting a net into a big lake and you're pulling up everything you can find about something that's relevant, it's as if you're throwing something you're throwing a fishing hook into a stream, and you're trying to catch whatever comes by over a period of time. Both are very useful, but they're also very different ways of looking at the problem.
Thanks, Dave. Bill, you've been online forever.
Only since 1984.
What have you observed? And because I know you've used that analogy about the stream as well, but what have you observed in your time online, and what's been exciting, and what's also been the weak points?
All right, so nice, simple questions. I'd first like to announce a competition, which is there'll be a small prize for the first person who creates a vibrant social network by lunchtime and registers Sifry as a username, so they can't have it.
Ning.
I'll get on with it.
Ning.
Not a vibrant social network.
Wow.
Oh.
Just one that has, maybe he's not on, that's all I was thinking.
I bet you is there. So yes, indeed. I'm the white-bearded man up here, and at last it comes in useful, because it demonstrates that I'm sort of grey-haired and distinguished, and therefore have a perspective on all of the stuff you modern youngsters are up to every day, and obviously can be suitably dismissive, because it was much better in the old days. It was certainly much better in the old days when I worked at Acorn Computers in Cambridge in 1984, 1985. And we had access to the internet in those days because we were working on research projects with the university. And I could read most of Usenet every day. I could get files by file transfer protocol, which I needed to patch my machines. I could engage in dialogue with senior engineers at Sun Microsystems about the hardware we were installing and the problems we had with database systems. And of course, I was using email to get in touch with friends and indeed some family and yeah, my colleagues. And looking back, what surprised me about how I felt about it at the time is that it wasn't exciting, it wasn't interesting. It was just something that came along with the job, and we did it. And nobody talked in hushed tones about the transformative power of the network or the way it was changing everything. It was just what we did. And good technologies become just what we do. And social media is not yet there, which is why we can fill a room with 300 of you to talk about it for a day. You know, there are no conferences about fax machines, at least none that I'm invited to. Because it may be primitive, but it does just work. And so looking back, it seems to me that what has really changed is that 15 years ago, when I was at The Guardian, I was doing things like, for example, the Edinburgh Festival. In 1994, in September 94, we built a website for the Edinburgh Fringe. And it was, as far as I know, the first time any major festival had done anything like this. And it was done with cooperation from the Fringe organisers, who gave us a database of all of their events, and also with cooperation from The Guardian. I wasn't actually working at The Guardian at the time. I was working for an internet service provider. And we had listings of all the events. We set up a cyber cafe in the grounds of the Pleasance Theatre, and people could have their photographs taken using a digital camera and put online, and they could write a bit about themselves. And people could submit reviews of events, and they would be posted the same day. And it was very dynamic and very interactive. And in some respects, not that different from what might happen today, with one crucial distinction, which is I was in charge. I built it, I ran it, I decided what went up there, I made it happen. I was God of the website. And if anybody wanted their stuff on my website, they had to ask me, and I would say whether or not they could do it. And so the emails written in green crayon didn't get published on the website. That, I believed at the time, was as it should be. And what has really changed in the 15 years is people do not need to ask for permission anymore. That the tools are available to allow anybody who wants to get online, that the internet has become a facilitating service for people to speak out. And a new form of literacy has started to emerge based around the affordances of the network. And I will never again say the term, but it is literacy 2.0, obviously. In this world, new tools and new services emerge because as people start to express themselves, their desires become apparent. In this world, the network, the neutral internet based around the end-to-end principle, can allow for innovation because there are very few barriers to entry. So something like Technorati can be set up without permission. And if there's one single thing that the social media revolution shows us, is that if you remove the requirement to ask before you do something, people do remarkable things. And so I think that's what has happened so far, but we are still, as you said, Dave, at a very early stage. We are still playing around. For one thing, and I should say that I've just come back from 6 days in Kenya, courtesy of the BBC World Service, where we were making programs as part of a season called Connected Africa. And that was largely prompted by the fact that 2 fibre optic cables, one called Seacom and one called Teams, have come ashore recently in Mombasa. And so the rate of internet access available to East African countries and eventually to the whole continent is going to approach Western levels. It's going to far outstrip BT levels, but will approach decent Western levels. That's going to transform things. It's not that the Africans are joining the club of the internet and they can do the things we do, but a bit faster. It's they will come on board. Another billion people will get connected and they will have better ideas than we have. And after that billion, another billion, and another billion, and another billion. There are 6 billion people, about 1 billion have decent access to the internet. When the next 5 billion are on board, the shape of social media will be radically different. We are very much at the early stages. There has been major innovations, but there's still a lot to come.
Thank you, Bill. William, Bill, how do I approach your name? Is it William?
I'm Bill Dutton on Twitter. Okay.
And Bill is Bill T, by the way. And I'm Kay Corrick. Bill, from an academic perspective, Bill's saying here that 1 billion are online, but 5 billion still to come. I mean, what have you been observing from your sort of more a slightly step back view from of what's going on and what has happened in the last 20 years?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess just to briefly emphasize what Dave and Bill have been saying is that both there's a combination of continuity and change in the sense of, I mean, Twitter, I would wager that maybe a very small fraction of people in this audience even knew of Twitter 1 year ago. I think the Obama campaign actually probably made it something, a currency, a common currency, and but that's very common on the internet, YouTube, all sorts of Facebook, things like this just exploded on the scene. So the constant reinvention of the internet, month by month, day by day, it's quite incredible. At the same time, tremendous continuity. I just want to remind everybody, it's bleedingly obvious, but the internet has always been social, right? I mean, I was on the internet in '74 and looking. In fact, when I first got on, I said, wow, I can look at what's on the Stanford computer from here. And this is going to be revolutionary. But I was using email since then. And email is social. It is under your control. It is easy to use. It's always been the core application of the internet. Email is still 98% of people online use email, even though they're using all sorts of other applications. Yeah, the digital divide is tremendous, but the global uptake of the internet is spectacular. I think maybe we know about the diffusion of the internet. Let me say something about the diffusion of social media. We did the Oxus Internet Survey, and it's not all hype about social networking. It is absolutely quite transformative in terms of the take-up of this. In 2007, about 17% of Britons, 14 years old and over, used any kind of social networking tool. And in 2009, 49%, 17% to 1/2. And by that, we said, have you ever created or updated a networking profile in the last year? It's probably much higher. It's probably significantly higher than that now. So it's really a phenomenon. Blogging is less popular. Maybe about 22% of Britons have created a blog. And Britain is not uncommon in terms of others. So even there's a digital divide, but there's also a divide in terms of who is using social networking, and clearly, for example, age, life stage is one of the dramatic factors. Younger people are much more likely to have done something in this area. I guess the one thing I would say that hasn't been said is that these systems are truly making a difference. This is, I like to think, don't ever think deterministically about technology isolating you or connecting you with people or empowering you or disempowering you. I think it's reconfiguring how you do things and the outcome of those things. So it reconfigures how we communicate with people. It's changing the way we communicate with people, but it's also changing who we communicate with. So the most common function of social networking and email is to reinforce existing social networks. You can see this, for example, when you might meet an old high school buddy because they discovered you on a social networking site, reinforcing the networks that you have in life. But we also meet new people. In the surveys we've done in Britain, 35% of internet users have met somebody online that they did not know before, and many of them go on to meet them in person. So this kind of, you really can't predict whether, you can isolate yourself or increase, or if you want, but if you wish to network, you're going to be networking in different ways, and you will have a different social network. Sometimes that are life-changing. For example, I can't help but mention the Match.com sponsorship. we estimate that 6 to 8% of people in Britain, married couples, met their spouse online. And newly married couples, recently married couples, up to 20% have met their spouse online. And so even once-in-a-lifetime decisions, we hope, are reshaped by social networks in ways that are truly important. And it's not only changing who we know and how we get information, it's also changing how we go to libraries. The idea that, the big thing before was search. The internet has always been a social communication media, but getting information was the big thing. And search was the big thing a few years ago. But now, clearly, social networks are competing with search engines as a referral for news sites, for actually, you came to this other site through a social network rather than probably, or
yes.
was it? Yes. So it's changing not only how we communicate with people, but how we're getting information. So I think quite transformative impacts. Can't wait for it. It's great that we can call it Web 2.0 and 3.0 because we can name things before we even know what they are. But we know that the 3.0 is coming. We just don't know what it is. But happy to. Anyway, I hope I addressed your question about the digital age.
In fact, there's a few people in this room who I think I've met, like Cameron. Where are you? Hello. I've met him for the first time today after knowing him online for a number of months due to a project that we were doing with Bill earlier in the year around Digital Britain unconferences. So it's fantastic, just to prove your point about meeting people. And actually, we've collaborated and we've done stuff and we've only spoken over the phone once. So I think that shows some of the power that some of these things can have. You mentioned 3.0. I was wondering whether there would be a bingo, sort of a word bingo. I won't use the other phrase we could have used for what phrases, but I feel that the man sitting next to you might be able to tell us what the future might be, but he doesn't have to. He can also give us observances on what's gone in the past, if he wishes. Nigel.
Okay, thank you. Well, my background, I was sat at computers in Edinburgh in its artificial intelligence department back in 1978, and just like the other reminiscences, it was a simpler world. It was a powerful world, it was exciting, but boy, there were just not too many people around, and you could enumerate the Newsnet users, you could kind of hop from one site to another and have a sense of overview. And actually, I think in AI, that sense of wanting things to be kind of organized and tidy, even when you're trying to explain the most phenomenal and powerful things, is always quite close to their heart, or our heart. And so we didn't get the web for a long time in AI, just did not get it. And what the web has done to AI and AI theory and research is demonstrate once again the unreasonable effectiveness of data. That you may have the cleanest logical rules and prescriptions, but when you have the scale of stuff out there and the scale of people, remarkable emergent things happen. So I think we'll be talking a little bit about this in the final panel, but the AI we witness nowadays is much more like augmented intelligence than the brain in a box that we were all striving to get our heads around, because the web has just connected so much collective creativity. So we have kind of come to it late, but coming to it late, we have turned up, and there we are busy trying to kind of find a niche in it. And I think some of the developments in areas called the semantic web, the linked web of data, where we're trying to move from an infrastructure that is document-centric to something that gets behind into the databases, underlying information stores, is going to be an interesting one. But that will have social aspects as well. But looking back, I think one of the things that we have become fascinated in the community that I come from, the technology and the research community, is why can't we anticipate any of this stuff? Why are we so appallingly disarmed by the emergence of a new phenomena, and a number of us have been thinking about trying to organize and marshal disciplines together. It's called web science, for better or worse, but what it does do is seek to bring together the social science, the economics, the law, the business, the management, the technology, to try and appreciate what might have happened. And so, trying to articulate that, the blogosphere is a really interesting case study. Actually, the data is out there to some extent, and thanks to Dave Sifry and Technorati and other people providing us tools, Matthew Hurst visualizing it, we can see the emergence of a structure. We can see inflection points where there seems to have been a kick point to take up. And we can speculate, we don't know because we can't understand the causal direction, we can speculate it had something to do with people had been self-publishing, but there was something about social citation at scale that seemed to connect these networks together. So ping and track back, very simple protocols, really lifted connectivity, much as the original web did. Now, how can we anticipate that? How can we engineer for new kinds? Was it obvious that if people were willing to blog and build exotic and interesting structures out of their extended essays and thoughts and opinions, that they wouldn't want to microblog, that they wouldn't feel a need to take the conversation down to its atomic element, in a sense. But that wasn't, in a certain sense, foreseen, certainly not at scale. So those are the things that beset us, is why are we mopping up descriptively after the fact in these areas, try to understand them, but having a really bad job in understanding, or a tough job in understanding what's to come. The other thing that I think interests me certainly is that as engineers, we're always accused of being deeply geeky, asocial, deeply buried down in cellars. In fact, of course, and more than that, there's this rather nice joke that starts out, natural people believe that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Engineers believe that if it ain't broke, it doesn't have enough features yet. So the remarkable thing about many of the social media that succeed is that they have this exquisite balance between being not over-featured and being sufficient to meet a need. And I'd love to understand as an engineer how the hell we design those things. Or is it just a big Darwinian experiment? You put a lot of ideas out there and some of them will hit the sweet spot. That's a challenge for us as engineers too. The other thing that I think that we kind of are drawn to in our web science machinations is it the same everywhere? So we have a sense of the shape and form of the Western blogosphere, and to some extent the English-speaking blogosphere and elsewhere. But in China, there are plenty of bloggers. There's 60 million fast-growing bloggers, but of course they spend very much more of their time on rather traditional bulletin board systems. They spend a lot of time in social network sites like Tencent doing different kinds of connected activity and understanding what the differences are, what the cultural assumptions, what the economic context means and allows them to do at scale is an interesting challenge. And finally, I think one of the things that's coming through is this whole notion of at scale we can ask questions, both as engineers and as social scientists and as business innovators. We can ask questions that are really, really tough otherwise. How do very large-scale structures become stable, like Wikipedia? And if they become stable, do they ultimately pay the cost of increasing amounts of oversight? So, as we say that everyone has a voice, everyone can participate, and we look at the very long tail that is the blogosphere, with a few sites having a very, very big voice, is it the case that everybody else further down is participating in a similar or equal way? Or do we find, in fact, that, in a sense, societal structures tend to re-emerge in interesting ways, even in this deeply leveled, democratic, technical context? I don't think we know the answers to these things. But one suspects, and there's interesting work underway, one claim is that the blogosphere, these kinds of social media support extremism. You have lots and lots of niche ideas down the bottom of the distribution, and the cost of entry is low, so lots and lots of weird and wild and eccentric ideas can spread. But actually, there's also evidence that people get pushed, on the whole, into paying attention to the very influential parts of the discussion space. Because ultimately, as we've all kind of expressed, the battle is one for our attention space, and that is a finite resource. And how we understand how to allocate it, what to participate on, whether we can actually find the time to blog or tweet, Nigel underscore Shadbolt. That's our challenge. There just ain't enough of me to do all the stuff that I'd like to do in this extraordinary environment.
Thank you, Nigel. So I've got a few questions lined up just in case none of you don't, but I have a feeling that I don't think we're going to have any problems there. But I'll just quickly do an overview of what's been said so far. We've got that the web is essentially social, the internet actually I think is essentially social. It's about connections, it's about this network. But it's also been something that has got more exciting as it's got cheaper to do and therefore more democratic, more easy for us to all participate in. But as Bill said, there's also been that reinvention as well as that continuity. But we've got this emerging augmented intelligence. Was that the right phrase? Did I write that down correctly? That's also appearing. But we've also got problems, though. How do we somehow not just have attention, but how do we find this stuff? How do we know even where to begin to pay some of our attention to find out what's interesting, to find out how we should be wondering what's happening in China or Africa, these emerging places.